Welcome to Breaking Battlegrounds with your host Chuck Warren. I'm Sam Stone. As always, jumping right in, our first guest up today, Juan David Rojas, is a journalist based in South Florida, covers U.S. and Latin American politics. Follow him on X, Rojas R. Juan D.
Welcome to the show, Juan. How are you doing?
Good. What about you guys? How's Arizona?
Good. It's fantastic. It's a little warm, but unlike South Florida, where we're both at a lot as well, it's not humid.
Actually, it's
a dry heat.
It's a little humid the last couple of days.
We've got some
feeling a little
monsoons
South
lately.
Florida-ish. Kind of nice.
One of you guys are here in South Florida too?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm there once a month for a week.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a company out there. So, sometime we'll have to go to lunch or something. But hey, let's start. You have this great article in Unheard called Lies Al Gore Told Me. His climate film goaded my generation into a cult. I want to talk about the specifics of the article. I loved it. Sam and I are not, Sam and I, pollution's bad. Take care of the
We're
environment.
all of the above energy people.
Yeah.
Just make it smart.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but first of all, tell us a little bit what it felt like when you were in school seeing this film and how your classmates responded to it. I don't think a lot of people understand because Sam and I are old enough. We get Medicare offerings in the mail. Okay. So tell me, what was it like and what did your classmates, did it really scare people?
Yeah. I saw this thing. I think when I was in the fifth grade, it came out in May of 2006. So I saw it probably like fall 2006 or 2007 more likely. And we're from Florida. Like I've always lived like 20, 15 minutes from the beach. I'm in Fort Lauderdale. And like the just like I just vividly like I still like remember this extremely like clearly just seeing those images that Gore put up of like just half of all of Florida being like sunken underwater, and it's like, oh my God. And these super hurricanes, there was we weren't really that affected by Katrina, but there was Wilma the same year, which is really devastating in South Florida.
Right.
We didn't have power for like a whole month. And so yeah, he talked about these super hurricanes, and a lot of us were like, "Oh my God, what's going to happen to us in like 50 years? This is terrible." And then, well, the issue is, it's like, look, I don't actually think that most of the film is. I think like its general argument and like explanation of like man-made climate change is broadly accurate, but there's just so much exaggeration and like. It's just extremely partisan too, but just he makes all these predictions that later turned out to be like false. So much so that like the UK's like High Court of Justice pointed out like seven scientific errors that would need to come with like accompanying explanation from instructors if they wanted to show the film in UK schools. So, broad argument is that like, I think that like, climate change is real and it's worth doing something about it. Like, there will be negative consequences down the line, but it's not an existential crisis. It's not going to kill us all. We don't need to exaggerate about it.
That's
We
it.
don't need to lie to people.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the problem because it's so extreme. Groups of people you should have on your side say, yeah, let's figure this out. Just immediately dismiss it, which is part of the problem with
That
media
too.
now,
Yeah.
right? We have
Mhm.
such extremes that there's no honest arbiter saying, look, we have a problem here and we're going to need to adjust.
Well, there's a long-term transition to a different energy future that's
Yeah.
underway.
Right.
Totally.
Yeah. I mean, it just, this idea that we're going to drive it at breakneck speed to prevent the mass extinction of of our species and all species, there's just not any real basis for that is the problem.
Yeah, absolutely not. And from my perspective, actually, trying to do this like we're gonna shut down all pipelines, all fossil fuels, and do everything with renewables overnight, like you actually end up having worse consequences than like the eventual negative consequences
Correct.
from
Well, and
climate
I
change. You end up having like higher energy prices, like unreliable energy. And either way, there ends up being a political backlash anyway. So like it's just so incredibly dumb.
well, and the other thing, I don't know if you've ever seen, and if you haven't, it's worth seeing. Michael Moore actually did a sort of rebuttal on the climate movement. I think this was around 2019 or 2020. He did a video where he went into the climate impacts of a lot of these, solar panels and wind farms and all these things. They're not purely green. Everything has trade-offs. Everything
Yeah.
has impacts.
Hmm. Yeah, like you need to build them, and in order to build them, there'll probably, there will be some fossil fuel emissions from that, and like some of these like rare earths, critical minerals, like mining them also can like cause a lot of pollution or be destructive or emit its own fossil fuels. So yeah, there's exactly like there's trade-offs to any kind of energy.
Correct.
We need an honest debate
That's the
where
problem.
we need to be able to talk about these things in balance.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
So, what if you were advising a young person in school today on this issue after writing this article and paying attention to it? What would you tell them? If a fifth grader today, what would you tell them?
Yeah, I would just say that look, the data is pretty clear. Temperatures are rising. There stand to be negative consequences from this kind of stuff. Actually, like the hurricane stuff is complicated because apparently, like in the North Atlantic, I went down a rabbit hole on this, but apparently in like the North Atlantic, actually, like it seems like some of the hurricanes may be more powerful, but they're also less frequent.
Hmm.
Right.
And then on the other hand, like because like over time, our building methods and stuff have improved, uh like actually less people die in general from
Right.
like hurricanes and stuff like that. On the other hand, like apparently in other parts of the world, like hurricanes are like more devastating, like these cyclones and like Africa and whatever. But generally, yeah, what I would just tell a student is that, yeah, look, this is happening. We've contributed to it over time, especially like, in previous eras, the 19th century and the 20th century. But yeah, we need to be able to talk about this responsibly, talk about what a responsible energy transition would look like, and what like a good energy transition would look like that like doesn't hurt people, doesn't cost people's jobs, doesn't cause energy prices to go up. And it's not a bad thing to invest in like renewables and clean
Right.
energy. I'm a
Right.
big fan of nuclear power, but nuclear power is expensive, and I just think we should have governments that are willing to make that sort of investment, like France did.
Correct.
And
Yeah.
there's great other than like on climate change, there's good consequences to that as well. I mean, think about this. I think the Iran war is one of the dumbest wars in American history, but if we had all of our grid relying on nuclear power, it like wouldn't be a problem like
Yeah,
for
it's a
Americans
very
right
different
now.
discussion. One of the things we deal with, obviously, because we broadcast out of Arizona, water is the number one environmental issue probably in
That too,
in,
yeah.
in the Southwest, right? Water and solar are a really great mix because water can store energy, right? So the issue with solar is that it's intermittent, daytime, nighttime. But when you combine that with desalination, there's a lot of things we can get creative with
Totally.
that will be good solutions for a
Yes.
lot of our problems if we stop this one or the other paradigm.
The extremes of both sides.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and you know what? Like, this is something that drives like progressives crazy when you just talk about mitigation. And it's like, look, being realistic, like that's another thing. These like predictions, it's like, oh, if the temperature goes above 1.5 degrees Celsius, 2 degrees Celsius, we're doomed. Well, you know what? It's gonna happen no matter what. What does that mean? We have to take measures to mitigate however much the temperature is gonna go up anyway. So we need to like, improve our building methods. We need to build like dams in certain areas. We need to like expand AC coverage. And there's this stupid debate that a lot of Americans aren't aware about in Europe. Like they've had these heat waves, and supposedly that's led to a ton of excess deaths because people aren't used to it at such a high latitude in Europe. And the thing is, Europe only has like a 30% like AC coverage in like most households. And
Right.
Right.
so, if you can believe it, like a lot of these like right-wing parties are saying is like, hey, we need to put more AC in public places and people's homes. And it's these progressive parties that say, no, we can't do that because AC causes climate change. That'll only make things worse. It's like, how stupid can you be, dude? Like, I mean, and this will just save lives. So
Yeah.
anyway, same thing with wildfires too. Like there's better ways to like farm and like whatever,
Right.
and also build that can like mitigate this kind of stuff.
We're with Juan David Rojas. He is a reporter that covers a journalist actually. It covers South and U.S. and Latin America politics. We got a couple minutes here left with you. Let me just ask you a question. So there seems to be somewhat of a electoral shift in elections in South and Central America, from Argentina, Colombia, Peru, El Salvador, even Ecuador and Chile. What do you attribute this to in regarding to them going from left of center to right of center?
In general, this is like the kind of the boring answer. Uh, you see like just kind of these wave elections in
Right.
Latin America. In the 2000s, you had what was called the pink tide, that all at once you had these like leftist governments take over, like Chavez and the Kirchners and Evo Morales and Bolivia, and then you had a conservative wave, which all were similarly like all at once a bunch of conservatives took over. Bolsonaro, Macri, etc. Then you had another pink tide, and now we're having another conservative wave. So it just goes back and forth, like here in the U.S. between the Democrats and the Republicans. And some people have even said that, like in the whole hemisphere, that we're kind of part of the same trend. But when you actually look at the dates when these elections are. But concretely, the things right now that people really despise in Latin America about left of center parties. Similar to here in the U.S., it's it's the same kind of stuff. It's like, and increasingly in a lot of cases, it's the stupidity over energy that we need to shut down all fossil fuels. I'm Colombian
For a
American.
continent that relies on it a lot for their economy.
Exactly. Especially in Latin American countries, because you oftentimes have these state oil companies that are the single biggest company in the entire country.
Right.
And it's a state company, so it's highly unionized too. But yeah, I'm Colombian American, and the president who just left office in Colombia, Gustavo Petro, like he was just like, no, you need to shut down all fossil fuels because fossil fuels are evil, and we're all gonna be dead in 12 years. So he put like these idiot academics on the state oil company's board that knew nothing about extracting oil, and it just went completely during his and then another thing is crime. And crime is a serious problem in
Yep.
Latin American countries. And so, the right
People are ready to see a change, and neither side has done a good job
No.
anywhere of delivering it. Is the problem? Juan David Rojas, thank you so much
yeah.
for joining us. We really appreciate having you on the program, folks. Follow him on X at Rojas R1D. Again, very much appreciate having you. Breaking Battlegrounds coming back in just a moment. Welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds. Our next guest up, Devan Patel, is a Washington, D.C. based lawyer, political strategist, and educator who operates at the intersection of law, faith, and technology. He is the founder of Crux Advisory Group, a fellow in AI ethics at the Rainey Center, which obviously we cover a lot of stuff from them. They are fantastic across the board. And he very recently was one of only 10 Americans invited to Rome in May with Pope Leo for the release of the Pope's first encyclical on the topic of AI. Devan Patel, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Devin, I want to play a little clip here from Lioness, which is the rage of entertainment right now, but it talks a little bit about AI and foreign influence. And Jeremy, go ahead and play that clip.
Anything interesting?
I never thought the headline "Ended Democracy" would ring so hollow.
You can only cry wolf so many times.
It seems so short-sighted. An entire industry rendering itself irrelevant.
No, if you think about how they were trained and who trained them, just follow the money. Qatar alone has donated over $11 billion to U.S. universities. China has donated $2.3 billion since 2012, with $12 billion in tuition paid for Chinese nationals at our universities. And you're surprised that graduates of those schools are espousing communist agendas and declaring democracy is dying? That's what they were trained to say.
Doesn't scare you even a little?
Fool's gold, honey. You want to scare me, start talking about AI. That's the real end of democracy.
So the point that clip made there is, I think that's what a lot of people think. AI is just going to destroy us all, destroy democracy, destroy humanity. And if you were going to give consultation to someone who's scared about this, is there some basic information where they could go and learn first about what is going on with just AI? A basic overview for somebody that's working 50 hours a week.
Sure. There are plenty of materials out there. I will say, even some of these tech leaders have written some pretty good, succinct overviews of the technology. Dario Amodei, who heads Anthropic, has written a lot about this. Yuval Noah Harari, especially, has written from the human perspective, and of course, many faith traditions have done a lot of good work in laying out what this technology is and the issues and opportunities, frankly, present in the upcoming future. Just to point to one, of course, as you mentioned in my intro, the Pope Leo's encyclical Magnificat Humanitas discusses this in depth, as well as a number of other publications from both the Catholic Church and many other faith traditions.
One of the things that you've talked about is transhumanism, and is human nature something to overcome? And we're starting to see, I mean, there's obviously been a lot of movement from folks who, the anti-aging movement and that sort of thing, the people who are trying to live forever. AI has a lot of promise in the technologies that could help deliver that, but is that a smart thing to be pursuing?
Well, I not to give it away, but I think not. I admit my bias here. I think that humans and the human body are meant to eventually fall to death. What did Benjamin Franklin say? Two things in life are certain: death and taxes. And rejecting the second part, it's fine. The taxes, happy to reject taxes, but the death part, that's a whole other issue. I can't cite enough science fiction. We've been through this for centuries now, of folks trying to defeat death or become God in some kind of way, right? Whether it's Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, or Brian Johnson nowadays, who's using his son's own blood to try and stay young. These are just different permutations of the same problem, and I have lots of issues with it.
What should the government's role be on AI regarding guardrails, or should it be the responsibility of somebody else?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's a top-down and bottom-up approach. Unfortunately, there are a lot of issues already present in sort of AI writ large space, and more to come. And so, for example, from the government side, there are a lot of guardrails that ought to be put in place around critical energy resources and protecting our infrastructure against cyber attacks, making sure that AI cannot get access from outside the sandbox to attack our infrastructure. Number two, child safety is a huge place where the government should and ought to do more around in protecting our most vulnerable. And frankly, that's beyond just children. That's our elderly. That's the disabled. We're seeing skyrocketing rates of mental health crises among the youth, suicide as a result of interactions with online AI chatbots. We're seeing lots of fraud being perpetrated upon the elderly and the disabled through AI technologies. So there's a lot that can be done concretely there. And for communities, there's a lot that can also be done, from more of the soft power approach.
How, Devin, I guess my question is, how does government do that, given that, like we just saw with Doge, you're talking about a government that's still operating on fax machines and letters. I mean, like, the number of people there who actually can comprehend this stuff in a way and understand the technology enough to consider writing some sort of regulation for guardrail. Are there any? There may not be anybody who really has that expertise there in Washington.
I'm relieved to say that there nowadays there are more than, let's say, last year and the year before. Is it a majority? No, absolutely not. Is it a lot? I wouldn't say a lot either. But there, I think, critical leaders on both sides of the aisle. Frankly, I'll give credit where credit is due to folks when they're doing good work. You have lots of good bipartisan legislation that's moving through Senate committees right now to hopefully get a comprehensive package to the U.S. House of Representatives before the end of this year on protecting children online. So there are folks who understand the issue. I also am imploring state leaders to do a lot around here, because folks who are in the states are much closer to the ground and understand and are hearing from their families, their communities, their schools, and can act and move a lot faster than the federal government can.
How should nations, or even states in our country, work together on this? What would if you were king for the day? How would you say, all right, everybody sit down, this is how we're going to go do this process? What would be the best way?
Well, first off, acknowledging the elephant in the room, right? We have the Chinese Communist Party and China as the sort of main other
Right.
AI power or AI wannabe power in the world other than the United States. It's a two-party race right now. And so I would say, first off, as much of a China hawk as I am, and I'm not allowed onto the Chinese mainland, and don't worry, I have no plans on going Chinese Communist Party, don't worry. But I would invite the Chinese to both track one and track two dialogues. There are too many critical issues here that we can just hope that by the United States dominating the AI race and beating, quote unquote, the Chinese, that will just kind of solve for these problems in the same way that the US engaged the Soviet Union during the Cold War in both official and unofficial capacities to ensure that the threat of nuclear destruction was kept as close to zero as possible. We need to be engaging the Chinese Communist Party directly, number one. And then number two, the United States has a massive a group of allies around the world, whether whether in Western Europe and democracies in Europe, or in East Asia, or even in Africa and Latin America. There are countries now sort of important in the conversation that otherwise may have been ignored in the past. Due to their rare earth minerals, due to the resources they have that are incredibly important to the supply chain for advanced chips, that once again, in this sort of quote unquote race between the US and China, minerals which are needed for chips, that's the whole currency.
Energy and minerals, absolutely. We're going to be coming back with more from Devan Patel here in just a moment, folks. Stay tuned. Want to get into accelerationism, some stuff Mark Andreessen talked about in his Techno Optimist Manifesto. That's coming up. Breaking Battlegrounds, coming right back. All right, welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds. We're going to be continuing on with the interview with Devan Patel at the end of this little segment. But first, we got to pay the bills, and then we got the segment everyone waits for, so we moved it up. Bee's Corner coming up here in just a moment.
Folks, did you know that there's over $300 billion in private student loans in the United States? That's with a B. And that $45 billion of that is distressed or defaulted. Well, if you're a part of this crew or have a family member or a friend who is it, I'm going to suggest you look at YREFI at YREFY.com. With them, if you have a distressed or defaulted private student loan that's so big it doesn't allow you to get ahead of your finances, they'll help you get ahead of your finances. They'll rearrange your loan, they'll save you $1,000 of refinancing, and your interest rate will never be above 6%. Can you believe that? So take control of your student loan situation, get your finances in gear, save a little money, pay other bills off. Go to YREFI, YREFY.com, or call 877-400-9989 and tell them Chuck and Sam sent you. Well,
is it music?
Mystery, secrets untold. The truth gets set free when B gets a hold. Crimes where killers roam off free, or even ones where they get caught at the scene. From cold case files to headline news, she's breaking it all down just for you. So come take a seat, don't miss a beat. These crime corners where the stories go deep.
What do we got, B?
Oh, this one makes my stomach hurt, but we'll go on. Lindsay Clancy, have you guys seen anything about this in headlines?
Yes, and this case is getting all sorts of online attention.
All right, well, you're going to refresh me. I'm sure I have.
Okay, so let me start with her career. She was a labor and delivery nurse, and this occurred in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Yes.
Her husband was Patrick. They had 3 children, Cora, who was 5, Dawson was 3, and Colin, who was 8 months old. After Colin's birth, Lindsay struggled with anxiety, depression, severe insomnia, and the feeling of being overwhelmed, which a lot of women refer to this as postpartum depression. And there's also something that I might note. It's called postpartum psychosis, which is a very important part of this story.
Okay.
So pregnancy causes enormous hormonal changes, and estrogen can rise roughly 100 to 1,000 times above normal levels by the 3rd trimester. So while progesterone can increase as much as 30 times from the beginning to the end of pregnancy. So they're having a huge hormonal drop, an increase within this time period. So after birth, both hormones fell sharply for her, and experts believe that those sudden declines may play an important role in this story. So she had her 3 kids, and it was a couple months after having the last one. She was in a psychiatric facility. They had various drugs that she was taking. She was taking Zoloft, Ativan, Trazodone, Prozac, Klonopin, Remeron, Seroquel, Valium, Lamictal, amitriptyline. That one I just butchered. I don't know how to say that. That's a hard one. Ambien, Buspar. So she was on all of these drugs, and they kind of just dulled her personality, and her husband made a statement that he had asked them to take her off of some of the drugs because she was turning into a zombie and wasn't acting like herself. So 3 days then before this instance where she killed her kids, and we'll get into that, she had been having one of her good episodes, he said, where she was having good days, and something just changed. She ended up asking him to go get some takeout food, go pick it up. There were search records in her phone of how long it would take for somebody to drive at that time to go pick up medication at CVS for one of the kids and to go pick up this takeout food. So that was a big part of the case as well. That makes a lot of people wonder, was this premeditated, or was she dealing with postpartum psychosis? Right. And the term postpartum psychosis was not brought up in the story until after this case happened. So he goes out, he picks up the stuff, he gives her a call. They talk for 14 seconds, and it tells her what meds, or she tells him what meds to get. He gets them, and he comes back home. He comes home, the house is completely quiet. He calls for her. She's in the front yard. She jumped out the window, so she tried to cut her neck and her wrist too, but they weren't like deep enough. So that also is a big part of the case of showing she wasn't maybe serious about these intentions, because, I mean, if you're serious, you're yeah. And she jumped out the window, ended up paralyzed from the waist down. Now, while he's calling the cops, he doesn't know where the kids are. This reminds me of the movie Shutter Island. He goes to the basement, calls for the kids, doesn't hear them, and they have exercise bands tied around their necks. 2 of them died on scene. One of them was brought to the hospital. The youngest was brought to the hospital, where he passed away 3 days later. So it's a big question. Did she do this on purpose, or was this from her postpartum psychosis?
Well, and it's turned into a political case where people are choosing which side they think was...
You know what? I think we're going to end this, but I think, especially men, this postpartum stuff's real.
Yeah.
And we need to take it real, and we need to be cognizant of it.
Absolutely. All right. Breaking Battlegrounds coming right back. All right, welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds. There's Chuck Moore, and I'm Sam Stone. We're talking AI with Devan Patel. He is a Washington, D.C.-based lawyer, political strategist, educator who operates at the intersection of law, faith, and technology, founder and president of Crux Advisory Group, and a fellow in AI ethics at the Rainey Center. Devan, when we went to the break, we were talking a little bit about AI in relation to China, in relation to our allies and adversaries across the globe. But I want to pull that discussion back to something else you talked about. Mark Andreessen's talked about this quite a bit, accelerationism. Particularly, he wrote in his Techno-Optimist Manifesto, we believe in accelerationism, and he defines that as the conscious and deliberate propulsion of technological development. When we're dealing with all these giant geopolitical issues, but also cultural issues, human issues, do we need to start having a real discussion about where we want AI to go and whether it's worth making progress in every area, or if we need to consider a more measured approach?
Chuck, I think you're asking a question that a lot of people haven't even realized to ask, and it's one of the most important in this entire conversation. So absolutely, there definitely needs to be a conversation had simultaneous with doing things. We can walk and chew gum at the same time as a society and a country, and I encourage us to do so.
What does that look like? I mean, what are some of the concerns that have been expressed out there? Because I can lay out my own personal ones, and for instance, like the flock cameras, which have been in the news lately, and the ability of governments to track every single aspect of their citizens' lives, which we've seen in China and other countries. What are some of the concerns that you would highlight?
Yeah, I mean, first off, so there's a whole bucket of concerns around government over empowerment, right? Like you just mentioned, lots of data and privacy concerns in the U.S. That leads into Fourth Amendment concerns, and the right to fair trials and fair justice, you name it. There's also a second bucket of concerns around what happens when these companies accumulate so much power that they are essentially more powerful than states. And we're seeing, at least from a capital perspective, right, the valuation of these AI companies like Anthropic, OpenAI, XAI, is skyrocketing into the trillions. And when you're seeing the kind of revenue that they're generating, the information that they are already controlling and that they will control, right? You can't even do a simple Google search anymore, Chuck. If you try to Google something, the half of the page you
Right.
get is
Right.
Google AI, and that is a program that they have generated to answer basic queries that you might have in a way that they think is optimal. And even the capacity to attain neutral information has been seriously stunted. So we have to ask serious questions around what does it look like now that we have these corporations, these companies that frankly are more powerful than some states around the world and maybe of equal strength soon, as far as being able to control certain levers of technology that we all will come to rely on.
Yeah, I mean, if you're Nvidia, and I love Nvidia, I've been an investor in them for many years, but if you're Nvidia, you have the ability to sort of make or break entire nations at this point.
Oh yeah, it's
So,
the everyone in the supply chain. It's everyone that controls the front end technology. There's a whole risk gamut there that we're running.
so where does you're an attorney, right?
Yes.
Correct? Yeah. So where does monopoly restrictions come into play on this? Seriously. I mean, I hear about this now I'm like, okay, well, we have these monopoly laws. Do they need to be implemented now?
I think that there's certainly a place for antitrust and anti-monopoly conversations to be had. One area that I've been seeing a little bit more chatter around is around who has access to your information, how the information is being used as a personal user. You don't have the kind of bargaining power in the market that, say, a major corporation does. Meanwhile, you're seeing these AI companies that are scraping all of the publicly available information, and which includes your and my information, and they're using it to train their models. They're using it to sell their products. And one area that I'm seeing some chatter around is the concept of collective bargaining, as in sort of digital associations in a way to challenge the sort of monopolistic power that these companies have. And as you mentioned, antitrust is a serious consideration here. I know the government under both the Biden and Trump administrations have seriously looked into antitrust legislation, antitrust litigation around Google, Meta, and have tried pursuing those.
So the antitrust thing, that's interesting because these tech companies do fundamentally, in many ways, have a different relationship with the people using their products than traditional companies have
Correct.
had, where the revenue being generated is not coming from the users necessarily; it's being generated by the users. So is that something where maybe there is a new category of collective bargaining that needs to happen?
Absolutely. We're experiencing or undergoing a paradigm shift in what it means to be in relation to the market and what it means for the market to be in relation to the government and as individuals to the government as well, in a way that we really haven't seen at such scale and speed. And so we definitely need to be looking into kind of all of the above approaches out of the box. We need to be thinking, and because this is a unique challenge and that is once again. We've undergone serious technological industrial change before, right? The Industrial Revolution, the advent of the internet, social media. These are huge things that have brought great changes to society, our country, the world, our economies. But the scale and speed, once again, are so uniquely different, and the depth by which the scale and speed reach is unique.
So President Xi is coming out to D.C. I view that they would have a different take on AI and the role of government in AI
Yeah.
and monitoring their citizens versus us. What do you think could be common ground that the United States and China could find on AI?
It's a great question. I don't think there's much common ground, but where I do think that common ground can be had is around life and death issues. I think that the rational agents in the Chinese Communist Party and the People's Liberation Army are just as afraid of humans no longer being in the loop in lethal autonomous weaponry as we are. And I think that there's shared concern around our nuclear capabilities and nuclear arsenals around the world and giving AI unfettered access to those, right? And launch commands, launch codes. And also virology is a huge issue that
Right.
and we've just saw, I think it was maybe this week or last, a public report confirming the creation of three or four new strains of viruses through AI that are, purportedly for medical treatment. And I'm not here to pan AI. I think it can be a great opportunity
Correct.
for all of us. But the fact that we've been able to create new viruses through AI for good obviously means nefarious agents can create
Hmm.
viruses through AI for bad. And just look at, if you just had one more rogue agent at the Wuhan Institute of Virology that really wanted to screw over the world or the West and had access to this kind of technology, we'd be in a totally different world where more people would be dying. And so I think that once again, the rational agents that are there, and I do believe that there are plenty of rational agents, should be likewise afraid of this and willing to come to the table.
Do people do people in the Western world, citizens, need to get real? I think they need to get really serious about this. We've talked about this a little bit on this program, but the cost of totalitarianism and authoritarianism is reduced enormously by AI. And on top of that, the way out of a totalitarian, brutal totalitarian regime in history has always been some form of revolution, often that involves some sort of violence. But the problem is, you're reaching a point with these technologies where a handful of people can truly control a population in ways, potentially when you combine AI and robotics, that are unassailable by any population. And it seems like we're at this really delicate point where we have to figure out how we're going to contain that going forward.
I don't disagree with you whatsoever. There's the like you said, the barrier of entry to authoritarianism, to sort of creeping authoritarianism, is incredibly low now. I remember a report, gosh, this would have been now 4 or 5 years ago, in what seems like quaint, antiquated times in the AI conversation, where a colleague of mine who had received information from some dissidents in China was telling me about, do you know the Ring camera? Everyone has a Ring
Yes.
camera.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
So the basic facial recognition technology that they have in Ring cameras that alerts you to, whether it's a person or a dog that's going by your house, that triggers your phone, right? It seems very simple. Back about 4 or 5 years ago, there were reports that the Chinese Communist Party had successfully stolen a lot of our facial recognition technology that was being developed in Silicon Valley and reusing that to find Uyghurs that weren't already in concentration camps, or to find Christians that were worshiping illegally in house churches, or democracy activists in Hong Kong that weren't already arrested. And so, think of this small technology that we think of as so quaint in everything now, and like our Ring camera, was used so efficiently, so
Right.
quickly to target, the less desirables
Mhm.
in Chinese mainland, the problems. And so that was 4 or 5 years ago. Such a small thing to think, and what we have the capacity for now. It's not just the Chinese, right? If the U.S. government wanted to do it in collaboration with these tech companies, I'm sure there'd be a lot more guardrails and a lot more folks pushing back. But at the end of the day, those concerns still exist. And China and the US aren't the only two countries in the world. There are plenty of authoritarians out there who want to suppress their people and continue their ideological and physical warfare against the West.
We're seeing the
So,
UK go down that road at light speed.
right, and it's not just this sort of thing in science fiction. It's not just something that ought to be left to the academy to debate. This is very real. It's here, and it's once again, like you said, it's so easy to fall down this slippery slope.
We got about 3 minutes here, and I have two quick questions for you. First of all, what role do religious leaders have to play in these guardrails?
Huge role. We have, I think, something around 6 of the 8 billion, nearly 8 billion people on this earth who are religious. You have folks who look towards their churches, their temples, their synagogues, their faith leaders for guidance on a lot of these external questions that are quite heavy and weighty. And I think what Pope Leo has done is kind of shown a way forward on how faith leaders can enter a conversation to which they might not be necessarily savvy to, right? They don't need, they're not tech experts, but what they are experts in humanity. And right now, I think we need some serious voices who are experts in humanity at the same table
Yes.
that tech is negotiating our new society, and that political leaders are either completely unaware of, or who are trying to do their best against the influx of tech money, but are seriously under-resourced, both from an informational perspective, but also in a civil society perspective. And a very quick way that they can be supported is through faith institutions and faith leaders.
We have a little over a minute here for you. So we had our guest before you was Juan David Rojas, and he wrote an article in Unheard about the lies Al Gore told me. The climate field goaded his generation into climate panic, basically. And he was just saying in fifth grade, hearing this, climate change, and it scared all him and his classmates, right? Now we have AI, and we have these kids and college students like, I'm not going to be able to get a job. What would you tell them in 60 seconds? Say, look, there's a great future ahead, but this is how you get involved to be proactive. What would you tell them?
Gosh, it's a tough question. Number one, don't be Luddites. Don't just shun the technology. Don't just think that if you don't engage with it, you can keep your head down and kind of charge forward. That's not the world we're going to live in. We need to engage with the technology, but we need to do so responsibly and aware that we still have our capacities. Work with this technology in such a way, learn it in such a way that if it disappeared tomorrow, things might be a little less efficient for you, but you would still be able to function in work. You'd still be able to critically think. You'd still be able to relate and have social interaction, right? All these things that make us sort of human that we don't think about in our day-to-day lives, we cannot offload that to this technology, because the second that we offload it, it is not an easy thing to get back, right? So still engage in critical thinking, still think through problems. Don't ask AI to summarize all your readings if you're going to college. Don't ask AI to simply solve your math problems for you. Struggle with it. In the struggle is how we grow, is how we form new neurons, and it's how we learn to be human.
That's the last word. Thank you so much, Devan Patel. Breaking Battlegrounds will be back on the air next week, but if you're not already, make sure to go anywhere you get your favorite podcast. Give us a 5-star review, download it, and tell your friends. We'll see you.
Hi, kids. Remember your dreams? All the future plans you made? Has private student loan debt destroyed those dreams? It doesn't have to. Why Refi refinances distressed or defaulted private student loans that others won't touch. They can reduce your payment. You can get your life back, and they don't even care what your credit score is. Don't let private student loan debt ruin your life. Call Why Refi today. Let's go.
Welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds. Our next guest up, Dr. Jody Edward Ginn, is an accomplished podcast host, author, speaker, historian, and media consultant based in Woodway, Texas. Got a passion for Texas history. He's author of several books and conducted extensive research in the field. He's specialized in historical consulting for media projects, including film and TV, and with major studios like Netflix. And definitely, folks, I really, Dr. Ginn, I enjoyed checking out your website last night, reclaimingtexashistory.com. I thought that was fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Let's start with two personal questions. First of all, what made you want to become a historian? Is it something you always wanted to do? And would you encourage people to get into the field? And then my next question is, what was your favorite film or TV show to consult on?
Okay. Yeah. So first of all, like many people, I got into history because of a personal connection. My great-grandmother lived to be 96, didn't pass away till I was 20, grew up hearing stories from her about her baby brother that was a Texas Ranger, went in and cleaned up a town and was given some engraved pistols. And that's about all I remember. Decades later, when I met my first real Texas Ranger and I asked him, hey, how do I find out if any of that's even true? Not only was it true, it was a far larger story than I could have ever expected. Became my dissertation and my book,
Wow.
Texas Troubles.
And by the way, what percentage of family history stories you think are true or highly exaggerated or or underestimated?
That's a great question, and especially because oral history is a whole thing in the field of history now.
Yeah.
Right.
And we shouldn't ignore it, but we should also not treat it as gospel truth. It needs to be
Right.
corroborated. By itself, it's hearsay.
Yeah.
And also, you have to kind of look at, are you hearing it from a person who actually experienced it? And are you hearing it from them relatively recently? Are you hearing it from them 70 years later? Or are you hearing it from somebody who heard it from somebody who heard it from somebody? You know, the old grapevine thing.
Yeah.
So all of that has to be considered. And so while that story ended up being true in my family, I can give you another one that wasn't. My late uncle was convinced to his dying day, literally, that his great uncle had been asked by Frank Hamer to go on the Bonnie and Clyde hunt.
Oh.
My own research, I came to know Frank Hamer Jr. That's how I got involved with the Highwaymen eventually, and all of that. And so, I found that not to be true. I mean, first of all, the only reason Manny Galt ended up on the hunt was because after the Grapevine murders of the two highway patrolmen, the chief of the highway patrol at the time asked Hamer to take one of his men with him, and he said, "Well, if you want me to take one, the only one I'm willing to take is Manny because he used to work with me." And that's how that all happened in the first place. So, but there's myths all over Texas and families all over Texas that,
Sure.
My grandfather, my great grand, was involved in the Bonnie and Clyde thing somewhere.
What's the great line from the man who shot Liberty Valance? About the myth, the legend. Yeah, it's sort of that way. All right, before we get into serious topics, what has been your favorite film or TV show to consult on?
Well, I guess it has to be the Highwaymen so far.
Okay.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah. And I wasn't on during production. I got asked for some help, which I did on a, strictly friendly basis, pro bono during production, some things that came up, but officially I wasn't on. I came in on the back end because they didn't know about me that, in time. And, but they got brought in on the back end for publicity. And I had known about this for 20 years, almost, that had been in the works because of John and I's mutual friendship with Frank Hamer Jr., because John just did deep, deep research. And his whole motive was to correct the misperception that it created about Frank Hamer by the 1967 Warren Beatty Faye Dunaway film, which was, aside from the use of a few historical names, almost, entirely fictional.
But Faye was beautiful.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about how different today is the Smithsonian versus 20 years ago.
Shoot, well, just not even that long. Really, just about 6-7 years ago, since Dr. Hardig took over, and the first thing she did was completely revise the mission statement, which was the only second time in the entire institution's history it had been revised at all. And the previous time, the shift wasn't away from history. And then the word history and all of that was removed, and it became about the future. And when you do that, the problem with education versus activism is education is based on scholarship, and scholarship is founded on asking questions. Mm-hmm. Activism starts with an answer and then does what it can to support that answer.
Yeah. One of the things, I mean, look, I grew up as a kid in the 80s. Our textbooks, we knew, were shading history in a certain way to a degree, and our teachers would provide some balance to that. But what's happened since seems to be this really dramatic shift where the materials, the teacher training, everything has gone in a direction, and the Smithsonian is really just a symptom of this, where education from very low levels to very high levels is being turned into propaganda and purpose rather than consideration.
Absolutely. Yeah, this has been a multi-generational shift in academia that then filters down through. And then you combine, so there's been that ideological shift within academia as a whole, and especially in the field of history. And then you've got the way teachers are even educated anymore. When we were the 80s, the 90s even, teachers would major in a subject and then they would take minor in education courses, or they
Right.
get a master's in education. Well, now most teachers, and I've got a childhood friend who recently retired as a career as a principal, and she confirmed this, and others have confirmed it. I'll admit it, I haven't done any sort of academic study of it, but that this shift. So most teachers now have an education degree, and they minor, if at all, in English or math or whatever. And then it's all about teaching methods, but not about any specific subject. So none of them are an expert in their subject, but then they're assigned to teach it just using these vague teaching methods. Well, that makes them less capable of being able to know when that content is.
In Arizona, obviously they all have education majors, but the number 2 degree is early childhood experience.
Well, and
which is
both
what
of my grad schools are teaching colleges. I went to Texas State University, formerly Southwest Texas State University, formerly Southwest Texas State Teachers College. And I went to the University of North Texas, which also started as the North Texas State Teachers College. So these are big education programs. And every time we would have education majors come over and try to take courses in the history department, and they all failed because the rigor was not there. The education teaching methods, they don't do much reading, they don't do much writing. It's mostly presentations, group projects, and that sort of thing. And so they would flunk these classes. I had one colleague during my master's that was able to pass. He's a very smart guy, but he was the first one to admit it because he was literally taking 15 hours of graduate coursework in the education program. He got a dual master's in history and education at Texas State. And he had started in the education, and he was taking 15 hours, that's like an undergrad load, in graduate work. In most, humanities, you take 9 hours in a master's program because there's just so much reading. I mean, we had an average of about, 20 to 30 books per class, per semester. And so when he first signed up for the history program, he tried to register for 15 hours and the system wouldn't let him. So he goes to the advisor, and the advisor tells him, yeah, it's a lot tougher. And he admitted, he said, I kind of, it's like, yeah, right, whatever. But then he said, once he got into the courses, he's like, yeah, this is a whole different animal.
Looking at everything that's going on with this hearing with the Smithsonian director, and I kind of tie this back to what's been happening in Cambridge, Oxford, with Jason Arday, the now former president. There was an interview. The first crack in his armor sort of came from an interview where the interviewer actually started asking follow-up questions. Mm-hmm. And he froze like a deer in the headlights and had no answer and just said, well, I just thought you'd believe me. When he was saying really ridiculous stuff.
Oh my gosh.
And this seems to have spread. I mean, this seems to be the sort of underlying problem across all of this, whether it's this woman testifying in front of Congress, whether it's directors of museums, history programs at universities elsewhere, all through the field, there's this attitude of, well, our activism makes us unquestionable.
Right.
And they're taught a script. These people are not being taught critical thinking skills. We have our own Arday. His name's Ibrahim X. Kendi. And,
right.
And look at it, every time he's asked a question, he can't answer it.
No.
At best, it's a word salad. And so it's unfortunate. But yeah, these folks are not being taught critical thinking skills. They're being taught a script. And when they are questioned off that script, they freeze like a deer in headlights, or they get defensive and angry. In fact, that's what I just got after the interim show. I got my first email anonymous threat.
Oh, congratulations.
Well, welcome to the club.
Yeah. Exactly. I felt, hey. And it's really, really entertaining. And of course, it's nothing but ad hominems and vague, attacks and insults, and but that's all they can do. When you question them, they get very defensive. I was at a conference a few years ago, and I had this group. This one particular person had tried to gin up a whole mob to come at me at this conference, and she only got 2 others that were dumb enough to show up with her. And they start, reciting this script. And when I started, and none of them are experts in this area at all.
Right, sure.
And I am. That's the thing. This is specialized. I read a great article recently talking about this kind of they had a great word for it, intellectual creep or something like that. It's like, thinking because you're a PhD in one thing that makes you an expert in everything.
Right.
And
Correct. Right.
which is just the opposite. You are an expert at something very, very narrow. Well, they were bringing up a subject that was my area, trying to play gotcha with me, and I would recite to them basic facts that just blew their whole narrative. The only thing that they could say back to me, and they did it over, but we have a PhD. We have PhDs.
And
Yeah.
If you're a parent and you had a child going to middle school or high school and they're taking history, what are questions you would have them ask their history teachers? So they're saying, I want my child to be taught. I mean, I just looked it up. Barely 50% of high school social science and history teachers have a degree specifically in history.
Right.
Which is frightening, because I think basically their knowledge of history is basically like getting your Axios newsletter daily. It's succinct, there's some bullet points, and it's, determine Hoover wrote it, right? What would you tell parents to do and demand when they have their kids go to middle school or high school about, this applies to all applications, obviously, but what would you tell them about history? What should they be asking the teacher?
Yeah, well, this isn't even like rhetorical for me right now. I literally have a daughter entering who is in middle school and this year is Texas history. And so I'll be watching that closely. And I have no idea yet what her teacher, because sometimes the Texas history teachers are really into it. There's some great Texas history teachers out there here at Texas. But there are many, like you're describing, that aren't specialists in it at all, don't have a passion for it, aren't well read in it. And so all they're going to be doing is reciting off of a lesson plan. And so, my way of handling that, and obviously I have a unfair advantage in this particular subject, is I'm going to be looking at what she brings home, what they're going over, and then correcting it if necessary. Kind of after the fact, though. I'm gonna let her take her tests, because I'm not gonna have any control of it. She needs to tell them what they want to hear for the test, unfortunately, if that's the direction it goes. But then I'm going to take her out. And in fact, I'm planning. I was hoping to do it this summer, didn't work out. But probably following this, she'll probably be more interested following actually having learned some of it. And we're going to do a little Texas history tour, and we'll address anything like that in that process.
Doctor, before we let you go, it strikes me that the core of this problem, you have all these administrators who are now backing up publicly. They can't defend themselves. As you said at the opening of our discussion here, there are a lot of people on the left and the center left who are pushing back against this as well. It seems like the fix has to start with university humanities. How does that happen, or do you see the possibility of that happening?
Well, it's going to take some major, heavy-handed work, because they've spent generations, creating this bubble and slowly pushing out. I mean, where I went and got my PhD, it was the biggest Texas history program in the country. It had all these leading scholars, and they've all been pushed out. They're all gone. And there is no more Texas history program. There's no. They've also lowered the standards to get in. They've lowered the standards, for comps and for dissertation, and all the way along the line. It's just not the same program at all. It's unfortunate. And that whole thing started with a coup. The department had elected a chair, as the practice in most institutions, most departments. The department elects their chair. They had elected a chair, but this dean overrode that election and installed the loser, who then started clearing out everybody who didn't vote for him.
Jeez.
Oh my goodness.
Jeez.
So, I mean, it's going to take heavy-handed changes, and you're going to have to find, because a lot of the folks like me that are in academia still, they're having to keep their heads down.
Right.
I mean,
Well,
these people are bullies.
And this seems like,
I'm
closely involved with Arizona State University and University of Georgia, and this seems, and the thing I've noticed being a donor to these universities and being on president's councils and so forth, this is where donors really need to step in. They would be shocked what's being done with their money, because they go give it. They've worked hard their life. Like, I'm going to give 100, I'm going to give $1 million, I'm like, whatever. And then they just hand it off. And I remember being on the president's council because they give a scholarship every year. And I remember one day sitting in, we had a committee of 5 people to determine who got these scholarships. And 3 of them were ASU employees.
Right.
And I just said, and the president council has like 200 people. I'm like, I called them up, said, do not ever have administrative staff on this committee that we're paying for. I mean, don't do it, right? And so It's funny, the students they gave scholarships to, because they had 3 votes, versus the next year when we had none of those employees on, were night and day people. They were completely different students, what they were looking to do.
Yep.
It was remarkable. And I tell my friends now who donate, I said, do not give a penny unless you're willing to be involved with how your money's being spent. And I think that's a big part of this. And it's the same thing for these high school things. Parents got to get involved in their schools. They got to go to their school board meetings and say, why do we have Dr. Bob or Teacher Bob who has a degree in English teaching history? I mean, we got to get it together.
No, you're absolutely right. And that's true across nonprofits, universities, whatever. That is how they've done this. They view it under the guise of academic freedom. They think that means they have carte blanche. You hand them a check and you have no right to question how they use that money. And that's just ludicrous in anybody's eyes. But that's what they're doing. And they've been doing it for years because there's been too much trust.
Right. Yeah.
And so there's not been enough oversight. It happened here in Texas, the Texas State Historical Association a few years ago. They had all but taken it over. And that's what it took the donors and others, finally waking up and saying, hey, what are you guys doing with our money? And really the unfortunate thing there that brought it is because they couldn't manage the money. These are academics. They don't know how to manage a business. They don't know how to manage money.
Right.
The 150-year-old private school I went to got taken over by those people about 12 years ago. It was gone in 3 years.
Exactly. Because they've run it into the ground.
Yep.
And that's the thing. And so, yes, donors need to be engaged and all stakeholders. And that's why the Congress and President Trump all have a right to have because the taxpayer funds, as I understand it, the entire operations budget of the Smithsonian. So yes, they have a right to a voice in all of this.
100%. Well, as we let you leave, I found the quote in Liberty Balance. So when you have oral histories, it was, "This is the West, sir. When the legend becomes fact, print the legend."
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate it. How can
Thanks for having me.
How can people follow you?
Well, right now, at reclaimingtexashistory.com, and stay tuned. Working on some various projects that'll hopefully be out in the very near future. In fact, in October, that's the most I can give you. Unfortunately, sorry to be coy, but in October there's a show coming out that I'm on that deals with a very timely history topic.
Well, let's get you back on then. And until then, good luck with your daughter. Give them hell, and we'll have you on back next time.
All right. Thanks a lot, fellas.
Dr. Jody Edward Ginn, very much appreciate that. That was fantastic. Folks, go to reclaimingtexashistory.com. Check it out. I went on there last night. I thought it's fantastic.
It was very good.
I nerd out on this stuff, Chuck. You know me.
I know. It was very good.
But folks, listen, last word. Share this bloody podcast with someone in your family, your friend circle. Let's help spread the word, because right now we have been growing and growing and growing. We're trying to keep adding new features and new content for you. The only way we do that is with your support. So give it that 5-star review, share it with a friend, and Breaking Battlegrounds will be back next week.